This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I'm going to use my experience from working as a nurse for 44 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to ask the questions that you may have while listening to our podcast. We both believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult end-of-life decisions in advance.
So please relax, get yourself a little something to eat and drink, but, save your military meals ready to eat or your MREs for another time when you really need them. Mm-hmm. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me. In the first half, Charlie reports about grief and has our recipe of the week. In the second half, I'm going to be continuing our chat about funerals with an exploration of military funeral practices. And Claire Lucky, known as the Grieving Bitch on Instagram, is back for our third half. Charlie, what's up?
In the South, salad does...
You're in the South?
Da-da-da. Yes, I'm in southern Manhattan. So here in not only southern Manhattan, but in the southern portion of America, salad doesn't always mean that lettuce is involved or vegetables.
Thank God.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Colorful, quivering, congealed. Sounds like me in college. Colorful, quivering, congealed salads have long been a favorite dish on luncheon tables across the South, and they are a perfect contribution to your next funeral lunch. Congealed salads are typically made from a variety of ingredients: fruit, cottage cheese, marshmallows, nuts, olives, suspended in one or more flavors of gelatin. Depending on the mold used, the salad can look as simple as something you'd see in a cafeteria line or as ornate as a jeweled crown. The recipe on our webpage for orange sherbet salad from April 1966 is the very first congealed salad recipe to appear in Southern Living. Orange sherbet salad is made with a pint of orange sherbet. The sherbet is mixed up with orange gelatin so that it melts, creating a creamy base for the salad. When the gelatin sherbet mixture is partially set, you stir in crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, mandarin orange sections, and whipped cream. Then the salad is chilled until firm. As Gomer Pyle used to say, good. Not to be outdone, as an associate professor of psychology at Columbia University, George Bonanno's research documented that people who repress intensely negative emotions have more successful recovery from grief than those who don't. It is assured you have to express emotion and you have to work it through, Bonanno said. Clinicians are encouraging people to do that. Regarding individuals after the death of a spouse, Bonanno observed, people who didn't express emotions did better. As part of that study, researchers evaluated facial expressions of subjects speaking about their deceased spouses. Those who exhibited genuine smiles and laughs predicted less grief over time and evoked positive emotion in others. He explained that emotions are inherent behaviors that serve a purpose. Negative emotions like sadness and anger are meant to be short-term. Expressing sadness or anger over long periods of time can undermine relationships and turn people away. He added, it is easier for other people to be around you when grief and distress are punctuated with laughter and smiling. People avoid someone who is in pain all the time. Bonanno's findings are not meant to encourage denial of pain in difficult situations. His research looks closely at how people handle grief and examines the result of their coping methods. The danger he sees is when clinicians assume that all people need to deal with grief in the same way. They may be in pain, Bonanno explained, but they don't necessarily need to focus on their pain anymore. They need ways to get their mind off it. Western culture tends to discourage laughter in the bereavement process. In our culture, we have an unfortunate suspicion of laughter, he said. Many hospice care providers say that when a patient can laugh about their situation, they are beginning to both accept their fate and process of coping with it. To that end, humor is indeed a coping skill that is vital for those going through any kind of difficult situation.
It's interesting, isn't it? So often you're treated as odd if you're laughing at certain situations.
Yeah, and that you're supposed to treat your your dying days with a certain amount of reverence and respect and all that sort of stuff. Maybe you should be wailing and pounding your chest, but it ain't necessarily so. No. But, it's the images, we grew up with, TV and movies and stuff like that. Please go to our webpage for additional resources and this week's recipe. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and remember to rate and review this podcast. We are working with a company called Hibu, and we really need your feedback and evaluation. Please take a minute and go to hibu.us/BOZMB to leave us feedback. If you go to our webpage, you'll see it right there. You can just easily click onto it. Additionally, as a licensed nonprofit organization, we are dependent on the kindness of our beloved listeners. That's you. And always appreciate your donations, which are tax deductible. If you find this podcast to be of help to you, and many of you have, please go to our webpage to donate so that we can continue to provide quality shows about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie. Today we're going to spend our second half talking about military funerals. So soldiers who die while on active duty, veterans who are discharged under conditions other than dishonorable, and members of the reserve components of the military may be eligible for the Department of Veterans Affairs benefits that are provided by their branch of service. And these benefits at a minimum are 1, burial in a VA national cemetery, 2, government furnished headstone, marker, or medallion, 3, the presidential memorial certificate, and 4, a burial flag. I've heard of people being buried with full military honors, but in truth, I really didn't know what that meant. The military are masters of tradition and flourishes not to be seen in civilian cultures. And the elements of a military funeral honors include a casket team. Now, these are body bearers or pallbearers, a firing party, a bugler, and the folding and presentation of the U.S. flag. So service members, regardless of rank, who receive the Medal of Honor, who are prisoners of war, POWs, or were killed in action, may receive military funeral honors with what's called a funeral escort. So that's everything that we talked about above, the body bearers, pallbearers, firing party, bugler, folding of the flag, but also a marching element. And the size varies according to the rank of the deceased, and a military band. Additionally, those eligible for a funeral escort at Arlington National Cemetery may request a caisson if it's available. A caisson is a 2-wheeled, horse-drawn cart or wagon that was originally used to transport ammunition during military battles and, when necessary, to transport the wounded or dead from the battlefield. Army and Marine Corps colonels and general officers may be provided a caparison, which is a riderless horse, if it's available. The caparison horse is the practice of having a horse of a deceased military officer led in the funeral procession and is a remnant of the ancient custom of sacrificing the horse at the burial of a warrior. Generally, the horse was hooded, sheathed in a cloth or armored that was covering it, and wore a saddle with empty boots facing backwards in the stirrups.
Oh.
Now, this has two levels of meaning. First, there being an empty saddle, meaning that the individual is not going to ride again. And secondly, it suggested that the deceased has taken one last look back at his family and their troops that they commanded. The entire caparison, the ornamental covering of that horse, is black. The hood, the saddle blanket, and cape are made of wool or serge, which is a strong kind of fabric that has a diagonal rib. And all brass and leather is highly polished. Now, Charlie, you and I are of a certain age where we can remember the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 23rd, 1963, the days of mourning that followed, and the funeral procession with muffled drums beating and a riderless horse. The riderless horse who took part in JFK's funeral procession would become renowned. His name was Black Jack. He retired in 1973 after participating in several thousand funerals and was the horse of a fallen leader in the processions for Kennedy, President Hoover, 64, Lyndon B. Johnson in 73, as well as General Douglas MacArthur in 64. Now, if you're an Army general, you can receive a battery cannon salute. And depending on how many stars of a general you are, it depends on how many guns. So if you're a 4-star general, it's a 17-gun salute. If a 3-star, it's 15. 2 stars, 13, and 11 for 1 star. Now, it's always an odd number, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute, so in case you're wondering. Military guns can be used for general officers, flag officers of the Coast Guard, Marine Corps, and Navy if they're available. So a minute gun is discharge of a cannon repeated at intervals of a minute, usually in connection with the funeral of a general or flag officer. The President of the United States is entitled to a 21-gun salute, while other high state officials receive 19. Again, odd numbers. The last funeral category in the military is the Armed Forces Funeral Honors, which are the same as the military funeral honors with the funeral escort, with the exception that the escort platoons from each of the military services participate. These funerals are reserved for the President of the United States as Commander-in-Chief, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and officers granted multiple service command. The pageantry of military funerals include a 21-gun salute, ruffles and flourishes, and taps. So let's talk about first, what's a 21-gun salute? That's one of the great honors bestowed on government and military officials, fired for heads of state at noon on the day of the U.S. President's funeral and on Memorial Day and in honor of the U.S. flag. Now, I don't want to really admit this, but I will. I was an adult with kids before I figured out the 21-gun part, because whenever I saw this occur, it was 3 guys, and it's like, where's the 21 guns? I can be very literal sometimes. It's really embarrassing. Well, it's 3 guys, but they each shoot off 7
times, yeah.
7 times. 7 times 3 is 21. There you go. I hope that you don't have to suffer as I do with not
you did the work for it, the legwork for us. Thank you. That's good.
Yeah. Now, I figured it out like at an uncle's funeral finally, but my kids were there and I felt like so dumb. It's like, really? It took me that long to figure this out. So gun salutes are rooted in the practices of early warriors who would lay their weapons on the ground to honor the other party and signal that they came in peace. I come in peace. So if a ship entered a foreign port and they wanted to demonstrate that it came in peace, it would fire its cannons from a safe distance, an action that would leave the incoming ship defenseless for a period of time because the reloading of those cannons was a lengthy process. And the gesture was a show of respect and a lack of hostile intentions. The incoming ship would typically fire 7 times. The forts onshore, which had an easier access to gunpowder, would welcome the ship by firing 21 times. 3 cannon shots for every 1 fired by the incoming ship. The 3-rifle volley comes from a battlefield custom during European dynastic wars in which both sides would pause fighting to remove their dead. Once the dead had been removed from the battlefield, 3 volleys would be fired to signal that the battle could continue. So in ancient customs, numerology, the study of numbers, developed symbolism behind most numbers. These cultures believe that the number 7 to be sacred, and therefore it's believed multiples of 7 would be favorable. Other gun salutes vary from 5 guns, the lowest, to 21 guns, the highest, by increments of 2, and are prescribed in accordance with occasion and the level of importance of those honored. It is generally believed that the gun salutes are set off in odd numbers because of an old Navy superstition that even numbers were unlucky. No one knows for sure why the number 21 was chosen, but the explanations include 1, that the ships only had 7 guns on board to shoot, which naturally I would kind of go with because that makes a lot of sense. 2, the significance of the number 7 in the Bible and that God rested on the 7th day. Or 3, the number 7 was sacred and lucky. I suppose you can choose whatever explanation you like best because we really don't know. But it's not the same as the salute at military funerals, and people confuse this all the time. The 21-gun salute is often confused with the 3-rifle volley, an honor displayed at military funerals, but the 2 salutes are not the same. For the 3-rifle volley, an honor guard typically made up of 7 members will fire 3 shots each at a fallen veteran's funeral. Though the result is 21 shots, those shots are fired from rifles, making the honor distinct from the 21-gun salute. So, if you're using cannons, if you're using guns, or if you're using rifles, there's a difference. Now, the second category is something that's called ruffles and flourishes. And if you look at our show notes, I gave you a link so you could actually hear this. So ruffles and flourishes are considered a military honor. Ruffles are played on drums, and flourishes are played on bugles. And I know Charlie's head has probably gone to the chips and the Ruffles potato chips
and you know what? I was going to say
snacks.
that. Thank you for acknowledging that. I was about to crack some joke about that, but yes, Ruffles and that French onion chip. Well, I digress.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Do I know this man or what?
What?
So these ruffles and flourishes are sounded together, once for each star of the general officer being honored, or according to the title or office held by the honoree. 4 ruffles and flourishes is the highest honor. Now, the next thing is called taps. The bugle call, known as taps, dates from the Civil War. I thought this was interesting. You know, I love history. So, in July 1862, while the Army of the Potomac camped near Harrison's Landing, Virginia, Brigadier General Daniel Butterfield summoned Private Oliver Wilcox Norton, his brigade bugler, to his tent. Butterfield, who disliked the colorless lights out call then in use, whistled a tune and asked the bugler to play it for him. After repeated trials, Norton played a 24-note call, which suited the general. Butterfield then ordered that this be used within his brigade. The new call would replace the regulation Army taps. The next day, buglers from nearby brigades came to the camp of Butterfield's brigade to ask about the new call. They liked the tune and copied the music. During the Civil War, its popularity spread through Union ranks and even among some Confederate forces. Shortly after Butterfield composed the tune, taps was first sounded at a military funeral for a Union cannoneer killed in action. The deceased soldier's commanding officer believed that a bugle call would be less risky than the traditional 3-rifle volley, which the enemy could misinterpret as an attack. In 1874, Butterfield's taps became the U.S. Army's official bugle call. Taps has been used in the U.S. Armed Forces ever since. At the end of the day, during flag ceremonies, and at military funerals. Whenever a service member is buried with military honors anywhere in the United States, the ceremony concludes with a 3-rifle volley and the sounding of taps on a trumpet or bugle. Melancholy yet serene, the call lingers in our memories. The name taps derived from the fact that the lights out call was traditionally followed by 3 drum taps. So, did you learn anything new today, Charles?
No, I already knew all that. Thank you.
You're still thinking about ruffles and bugles.
Am I that transparent?
Yes.
No, it's just really fascinating, just the evolution of all this. And like you said, it starts, with something obscure or something that was used for something else, and then it just, over the centuries now, just, developed into what we know today. Yeah.
And I think that if you're a military family, it's good to know what all of that means.
Right.
And if you go to a military funeral, you can now tell people at the funeral lunch where you've brought your orange Jell-O salad and say,
where are the ruffles?
I learned all this that everyone dies. But I don't know. I thought it was fascinating, so I wanted to share it with y'all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In our third half, Claire Lucky, who goes under the pen name Grieving Bitch on Instagram, returns this week. Claire was her husband's caregiver until his death in June of 2021. To cope with her loss and trauma, she channeled her sense of humor and inner bitch by creating the Grieving Bitch. Claire shares her grief journey and life challenges as a 34-year-old widow living in New York City with Everyone Dies in her regular bi-monthly third half segment.
Welcome to our third half of Everyone Dies, where we are continuing our interview with Claire Lucky. You can follow her on Instagram under the title Grieving Bitch. And last time we spoke to Claire, we were talking about her and her husband, Matt. Matt has glioblastoma, so listen to the previous shows to kind of get that story. And what had happened was after surgery and radiation and chemo, and ultimately none of those things were able to stop the tumors within Matt's brain. The decision by the oncologists were that there were no more treatment options. And so when there are no more treatment options in the case of cancer or really any other disease, when everything can't be cured, is then moving into a palliative care or a hospice mode. And if you want to learn more about palliative care and hospice, we have a couple of shows about that, and you can listen to this podcast. We'll go into those details, and you can look in the show notes, and you can see those listed there. But we're going to pick up with Claire. Hey, Claire, welcome back.
Hi, Marianne. Hi, everyone.
So I'm just chatting away here, and I realized I didn't say Claire's here. So around June 2nd of 2021 was when Matt was admitted to home hospice. So he's at home, and usually with a hospice admission, the nurse will come to the house with, a pile of paperwork and lots of information. And was that the way it was for you, Claire?
It was indeed. I had a visit from a intake nurse, and she gave me a hospice 101. And I think the number one thing that I was trying to think about was this was a transition of Matt's life from quantity to quality. So I was very focused on making every day count. And I knew the trajectory with glioblastoma was, if Matt was put into hospice, these tumors can grow and double in 17 days. So I was hoping for part of the summer with my husband. And
Mm-hmm.
I had read a book about hospice leading up to it, and I think that I read Gone From My Sight by Barbara Carnes.
Those are wonderful. Well, there's a whole series of books that Barbara does, so we can reference that in the show notes.
Absolutely. And I felt prepared, but I'll tell you one thing I wasn't. I think it's one thing that you prepare as much as you want for the Super Bowl or this huge event, and then you get there and you're like, ugh, like now I actually have to do it. So I think I was struggling a bit to make sure that I had enough coverage for Matt because he was disabled at this point. So I had to really get up to speed with hiring around-the-clock home health aides for him because he's a 6-foot man and I'm a 5'1" woman. So the math just doesn't add up. And I had a home health aide and I ended up finding an agency to fill in the gaps there. So that was one logistical hurdle that I climbed through. And then we got all the equipment in, and we were fortunate enough that we live in a big building in Manhattan, and I had some really nice staff that helped me move out our king bed, and we put a hospital bed right in the bedroom, and they helped move in all the other furniture required for hospice. Wow. And then it really became, how do we make the best of what we have for as long as we have.
And how did you do that?
I turned our apartment into New York City's hottest club. I called all of Matt's friends, all of his family, all of my family. I alerted everybody that Matt was in hospice and no longer receiving treatment for glioblastoma on Caring Bridge, which is a website where you can communicate to your friends and family the latest and greatest health news. And
that website, we'll put it with our show notes. Caring Bridge is wonderful because it's one of those things where, like if I know you and I can go to the website and I can see, oh, nobody signed up for dessert on Tuesday. I can get one of the Everyone Dies funeral recipes. Don't have to be for a funeral. You can use for Caring Bridge, and I can bring it over and, drop it at the door, come in and visit, have a drink, whatever. But that way, anybody who wants, people say, oh, just let me know if you need any help. Lord Jesus, I can't tell you if I need help, but you can go to Caring Bridge and you can see, nobody's feeding them that day. I can do that. Is that how you used it?
I totally agree with the let me know if there's anything I can do for help. I can't tell. I would be, if I had a dime for every time I heard that, I would be on a yacht in Belize right now. But I mean, so the tool is great for that because I can say I need laundry on this particular day, or Matt loves bourbon. Can you please bring bourbon? So it's a great way to facilitate that rather than having to deal with thousands of text messages and emails. Right. So we had a lot of. I think we had just about everybody that attended our wedding show up during the month of June to have a visit with Matt. And I think that's truly special. And we gained so much weight during it because we were just eating cookies and eating steak or eating whatever we wanted. There was one particular meal that I was fond of that Matt really wanted McDonald's one day. So I got the license to get everything I wanted from McDonald's. So we did that. And then one other special thing that we got to do was we made a trip out to the town right next to where we got married. And we'd made a few trips there before, and we're fortunate that it was only 2 hours away and it was handicap accessible. So we had a wonderful vacation together in mid-June.
Wow, that is wonderful. Because sometimes people go into hospice and they think, all right, I'm in hospice, I'm dying, and that's just the end of it. And I taught nursing for years, and I would take my community health students, into hospice, and they'd be like prepared for the angels singing and the harps. And, we'd go in and the patients would be laughing and chatting. I had one lady with piles of wallpaper books, and she's like, help me pick out some wallpaper for the kitchen. And I remember the students like, what the heck? These people are dying. It's like, yeah, but they're not dead. They're living.
Yeah, they're still living.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the bad rep of hospice is that, well, everyone who's in hospice dies. Yeah, but everybody who's alive dies. So we don't live our lives thinking, oh, I'm mortal, going to be dead soon. No, we live. And then when our deaths come, then we'll deal with it. But until then, you're alive. And, you guys were young. You're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be dying at, 33, 35 years old. And so you're doing exactly what you should have been doing, at that age. You were enjoying each other and partying and drinking and eating McDonald's.
Exactly. And when we were on our trip, we went to our favorite dive bar, and Matt stood up in the bathroom, and It blew us all away. It blew me away to the point that I had to sneak outside and call his oncologist and say, are we sure? Because he just stood up in a dive bar. So I just wanted to double check that we really needed to be in hospice. And he was, they were very kind, and they were very happy that it happened. And they did say, listen, they played the scenario through, and they're like, we're going to, chemo's going to hurt him. He's not hurting from chemo right now. This is most likely the rally. So enjoy it. Have another drink.
Right. Have one on me. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so at what point from, he went into hospice on June 2nd and he died on June 21st. At what point did he, we use the term, actively dying, where kind of things are shutting down? Do you remember when that started, or did that ever start?
I think it might have started, and I feel as though I was looking for things that were really like very, very end of life. Like I was looking for labored breathing or things like that, and that wasn't quite happening. And when we came back from our vacation, I remember him saying to me, I'm not leaving the house ever again. And I just thought, whatever, because I'm on to like planning another trip or something like that. And we get back, and then it seemed slowly every day something minor wasn't really working, but I think I can only say that in hindsight. And I recall I hadn't left Matt's side since we got the bad news MRI in early May. And I remember thinking that, Father's Day was coming. My ace home health aide was going to stay with us for Father's Day weekend. And it just occurred to me, I should do something for myself. I should go see my father. Matt's got more time. He's got more gas in the tank. So I asked my home health aide if she would be comfortable if I went out for Father's Day to see my father. He's only 3 hours away. I figured I would just be gone 24 hours. And he was like, yeah, go for it. Stay 2 nights. I don't care. And I was like, no, the one's fine. That was really enough for me and my father. It was just supposed to be a quick trip. So I remember that on Father's Day, Matt, said Happy Father's Day to his father. And then he said, I gotta tell your dad too. And he texted my father. He called my dad, his dad too. And I thought that was just incredibly sweet. And they thanked my dad thanked my husband Matt for sharing me, and Matt graciously said, thank you for sharing her with me. Beautiful. I know, such a beautiful little exchange that they had. And then I told Matt, going to see Dad, love you, I'll see you tomorrow. And then as I'm walking out the door, I'm just doing one final logistics check-in with my home health aide. And he says, I think we should start getting applesauce and beans because his stomach just isn't processing food as well. And I remember thinking, okay. And then I dialed up Fresh Direct, which is just a grocery delivery service, and started to create an order. And then I'm off. I'm off to visit Dad. We have a lovely dinner. And I spoke to our home health aide that night around 7, and he said, Matt's going to bed soon. It was a little weird for him to be turning in that early, but with his disease comes tiredness. So he was up all day, and he went outside and had steak with his brother on the deck. So I thought, maybe the sun took it out of him a bit. And they're off to bed. Me and Dad are off to bed. And then at 4 or 5 a.m., I get a phone call from our home health aide, and he says, "You've got to get back here right now. He's having trouble breathing." And I felt like a 5-year-old helpless girl in that moment, knocking on her father's door, saying, "Daddy, I need help." And I just remember looking at him and saying, "It's Matt. I have to go." And I debated, honest to God, chartering a plane, like chartering one of those blades, those helicopters that take you from Long Island back to the city. And I called the home health aide back to kind of talk to him about it. And I was like, I don't care how much money it costs. Like, just tell me how much time I have. I could take an Uber. I could take a bus. And he was like, I think you have time. He's like, the hospice nurse is coming, but just hop on the bus. So I'm on the bus, at the first bus at like 5 or 6 a.m. And the home health aide and the nurse give me a call when I'm on it, and they say his breathing's labored, he's got hours. And I'm shocked at this. We went from 24 hours ago, his stomach isn't digesting and we should, maybe get him some soft food, to hours. And I'm just shocked. Even now, I can barely form a sentence over it. And they eventually get him a little audible, and I get on the phone with him. I can't understand a word he's saying, and I just, I'm asking him about the cat and trying to get some sort of response out of him, because we have a great cat. So I'm trying to talk to him about something good. And I can't really hear what he's saying. And, we say, I tell him, all right, I'll be there soon. And I hang up, and I'm stewing on the bus. And then maybe 15 minutes go by, and I text the home health aide and I say, please, I'm just begging him, please tell Matt I love him and tell him to wait. And then a little bit more time goes by, maybe 5-10 minutes. And then the home health aide calls me, and he calls me to tell me that Matt had passed. And I come to find out the impetus was our home health aide told Matt what I said via text, and that I loved him and to hold on. And then he started to cry. 2 tears fell from his eyes, and he took his final breath. And I just think there was maybe a choice made, that he let go when I was safe with my father. And he might have wanted to spare me from another moment of me watching him suffer. Lord knows we've been through so much during that treatment. I've seen him in all ways that he didn't want to be seen. So I like to think he had some choice in when he went. And I've made some. I wanted to be with him. I absolutely wanted to be by his side, and I didn't envision it going this way. But I'm happy he went his way.
Claire, I could tell you so many stories of people who tell me this exact thing. And some people are accepting of it. Some people are pissed. Some people have people have all kinds of different reactions. Like, I wanted to be there. You know, I just went home for 10 minutes to take a shower and they died then. I just went down to the cafeteria to get a cup of coffee. It's the only time I left them and they died then. And it's like, so many people, Claire, choose when they're going to die. And I think that you're right. It's like, I want to do this myself. And it's not what we want because we want to be there, but it's for whatever reason what they need to do. And it's hard to, you know, like you're with them every freaking day for, you know, a couple of months and, you know, like then. But I think that was his choice. And I'm glad that you kind of recognize that and say, I'm glad he did it his way, as much as it's not their way.
Right. I kept playing Frank Sinatra, that song, mm-hmm. I Did It My Way. I think that's mm-hmm. what it's called.
Yeah.
I played that on loop for like a day, and that's how I survived the fact that I wasn't with Matt when he died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, the snarky side of me is like, I even read the book. I wanted to be there. I was prepared. I told him to haunt me. I like, we've had so many conversations. I was like, my sarcastic is like, really? But mm-hmm. I think it's ultimately, it's what's best for him, his soul, and his body. And if that's when he was ready, that's when he was ready. And the other side is, you know, well, he was looking forward to not eat, you know, he wasn't going to eat any solid food. His last meal was steak, Levain cookies, which are some amazing New York City cookies, and bourbon. So that's a great last meal. And mm-hmm. I think that's what he'd like to do when he transitioned. So I think, you know, he made a good choice.
And, you know, the last thing he heard was, you know, that this incredible woman loved him. And I sometimes think it's sort of like that final act of love from people that, you know, I don't want your last memory of me to be my last breath or to be, you know, anything, I don't know, unbecoming. Like, he wanted your last kind of thing to be, I love you, I'm going to go see Dad, you know. And, you know, if it's a dignity thing, if it's a control thing, if I don't know what it is, but I gotta tell you, it happens all the time. And it really pisses people off when it happens.
I could see it. I could totally see it. And you just reminded me of something else. I leading up to that, I don't think he was in hospice at this point, but we were watching a show and someone was talking about someone's last words, and I looked him dead in the eyes and I was like, well, you can think about your last words because I'm going to be there. And like, that's, we were open enough to like discuss the fact that he was dying from glioblastoma, and we were able to go there. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for that. And he looked at me and he said, my last words are going to be, I love you. And mm-hmm. So in a way, I knew what his last words were going to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that his last words that he heard from me were, I love you, mm-hmm. as well.
What an incredible story, Claire. And I'm so glad that you're the person that you are. If it's, you know, maturity or how you were raised or good therapy, whatever it is, that you're able to see it as his self-determination and nothing to do with, you know, that bastard, you know, he left me out of it. You know, some people take it so personally, you know, like they want to have that last death scene, and it's sometimes that's not what somebody wants to share.
And it might not look like the movies. It might be worse than what we think.
Well, I always watch movies. I'm one of these people who talks to the TV or sometimes hollers at it, and like I'll see things, I'll say, "That's not how it goes." And my husband just quietly rolls his eyes. Because, these things that we do see in TV and movies, it's like that brings us the expectations of, well, this is, this fantasy, kind of death. And actually one of my favorite death scenes, most real death scene, is in Shrek, when the King Frog dies. Have you ever seen Shrek?
No, and now I have to for the death scene.
Well, I think it was one of the shows that we did on like the last hours of living, and we put that clip in our show notes so that, because it's that people will say, like they'll sit there and they'll watch the breathing and there'll be no breathing, and they'll say, okay, he's dead. And then they'll go, and they take a deep breath and they start breathing in. And this scene is Antonio Banderas' The Cat is like, he keeps taking off his hat, putting it over his heart. The king is dead. And then the frog lets the breath in again. And it does that a few times, and it's very, very accurate in terms of that Shane Stokes kind of breathing, that end of life breathing. So I'll put that in the show notes, the breathing link for that podcast. But who would know that one of the more realistic death scenes is in a Shrek movie?
I love it. Cutting edge.
Yeah, right. Well, Claire, thank you for sharing that, and geez, girl, what a story. And so we're airing the show as part of the anniversary of the 1 year anniversary of Matt's death, and it's been a hell of a lot long year for you, and a lot has happened, and we'll come back in July and kind of keep going and talking about like the second year of being a grieving bitch. What do you think?
It sounds like a plan.
Well, my heart's with you, girl. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for listening.
Okay.
That's it for this week's episode. Stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, because no one's getting out of here alive. Thanks for listening. Like sand through an hourglass, so was sand in my swim trunks at the beach. This is Charlie Navarrete, and as Dylan Thomas reminds us, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage. Rage against the dying of the light.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. But taps for now. And remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.